Hey guys, welcome back for another car ride conversation. I know we're kind of dabbling into a little bit more focus on Kessinger lately, and conveniently I'm headed to go get my windshield repaired, and this thought just kind of popped back into my head because I was reading in one of the Watts discussion groups how someone was questioning if the reason Chris Watts said that he had sex with Shanann was to just give an excuse for why the bed sheets were taken off the bed. And I've heard that before. I know that we've discussed it before on the channel, and I got to thinking, and I'm like, you know what? There's another scenario there that we haven't really talked about, and it's kind of in between my theory that Kessinger was actually there that morning, and that whether she came up from the basement and Shanann saw her and she was like, I knew there was somebody else, because keep in mind, this is said by Chris Watts. Now, he has intentionally blurred the timeline of when these conversations happened, and we have to keep that in mind. Did she say, I knew there was someone else? Yeah, I'm sure she did, especially if she saw her, or if she saw her come across the cell phone or something to that effect. But what if during that 111-minute phone call that no one wants to talk about, Kessinger finds her way over to the Watts home and comes in through the back door, and she and Chris end up having sex, and they know
the phone log,
that
and unfortunately, again, the attachments on some of those text messages, and I'll write it on there, and then you'll just sign it.
So
Okay? Do you understand the questions there? Do you have questions about any of the things that it says? You understand you don't have to do this. You're doing it of your own free will.
You know, she doesn't see you come through the front door. Now, mind you, she's already come through the front door a couple of other times, but in earlier videos,
I know you're tired, so if you want to let your dad read it too.
The explanation to Shanann
that's a good idea.
Can you fill it out before I sign it?
Yep. And just, you read it, and if you have any questions, then we'll put on there what we're after.
Do I think that would have gone over very smoothly with her? No.
You should have told me I would have got you some food. I got food in my car.
It's not
Shanann comes across as somebody who also
She hadn't been feeling good. Not
of the
because any
mindset that
just
you can have
Like, I got sick prior to
Jim.
this whole thing
Fine.
happening,
Her
and
close
then I
relationship
think
with Chris Miller
all of
is
this
what's so
compounding with the fact that I'm
controversial to
sick,
many
it's just
people.
not good.
But if she
not really
didn't
been
see
eating or
anything
sleeping
wrong with
much at
her
all.
relationship and friendship with Chris Miller, maybe she wouldn't have thought too much about
yeah.
Kessinger coming over to help Chris with.
I'm with you. We definitely need to
allegedly his- my
accelerate the
cousin's
case,
daughter.
because
She
the
wouldn't
more
have
long,
thought
the more it
anything of
takes, the
because
less
she trusted
sure
Chris
that they
so
are
much.
of
She wouldn't have thought
situations.
anything about
But on the
someone
other end, I think
coming
if we,
over or dropping something off,
if you do just that only,
to that
You
effect.
tell me what you're willing to provide to me, and we'll
is that
write it
good
on
Chris
it.
enough?
tells Kessinger, park in the
I just
back,
want, like, our text
and then I'll just let you
conversation,
in,
and
or
then I
I'll
guess
let you in
our
the
phone
side,
call
the side
records.
door. I'll let you in.
So I'm going to put,
I don't even know
time and date of the phone call
necessarily
records
through
and
the
then our
basement
text
window,
message.
but
Could we get
could
photos
she
of
have come
him?
through the sliding glass
Could we
door,
get photos
at
of
the
him?
back door? It's very
Off
possible.
of
Would you
that?
mind if we got his photos?
Like I said,
that he
they
sent to you?
could have.
Oh, well, they'll be in that text message thing.
So all his photos were sent, there was no apps or anything else you used
No,
that you
no,
guys
no,
were
no,
sending?
no,
It was all
no.
just text messages?
Yeah,
Okay, so it'd be an attachment to a text that he sent you?
She's
pretty
not
much.
here, I'm
But
not
everything
fine.
is in the text and the phone call
And
records.
then
So,
Like, all of
Shanann ends
it.
up
because we
getting
don't have it
off.
on tape, we discussed
And,
prior
Chris's
to turning the
text,
tape
oh
on.
crap, I fell asleep on the couch.
On Tuesday, which would have been the
Like,
14th of August,
I don't know.
you
Like,
had
to
read
kinda
some
go back and
newspaper
forth on
articles
that,
on the
whether or
13th and the
not he
14th
was
that
actually
regarded
asleep on
this
the
case.
couch,
You had also
or,
had a conversation with Chris at some point during the day on Monday.
if it was one of those
And
situations
on Tuesday,
where
because
he
of what you
Kessinger had been
found,
intimate
specifically what you
and
said
then they
was,
fell asleep
and I don't
in
let me
it,
put words in your mouth, but
Shanann
you
comes home
found out that his
and finds it.
wife was pregnant.
And
Yes.
I don't know.
And you did
What
not
are your
know that
thoughts on
prior,
that? Because
and you found that out
it
via the
would
news.
make sense as well if the sheets were stripped off that bed, because he had already slept with Kessinger on them. And if those sheets were not washed and put back on the bed, then they could have been tested, and they weren't. You know, they gathered some sheets, but the ones they primarily took had makeup on them, and from what we can tell in the photos and stuff, was that Shanann did not have mascara running down her face. She did not have any of that found per the autopsy report. Just like she did not have blood filling her eyes, like Chris says, because the autopsy denounces that. It says, no, there was no petechiae in her eyes. And so therefore, you did not see blood fill up in her eyes. It just did not happen. And so, knowing what we know about how Chris Watts is often not the most forthcoming, he's honestly not been transparent about anything. There are certain conversations that took place, yes. There are certain things that were said, yes. But in the time frame and on the timeline that he says or claims that they were is inaccurate. And it's been proven that it's been inaccurate. So, what are your thoughts on Chris finds out that Shanann's flight is delayed? And we're talking a couple hours delayed. Like, it was delayed a pretty lengthy amount of time. Kessinger, now that I know the layout of Colorado, Kessinger's drive to Watts' house would have been maybe 10, 15 minutes, depending if I'm sure she sped at some point. I mean, women tend to speed, but, you know, we're looking at 10, 15 minutes, flight's delayed 2.5 hours. She could have gotten over there quick for a booty call, or at least to be like, hey, look, she's not home, and I'm not lying to you. And then, you know, intimacy, etc. And then Shanann gets home. So, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts? And then, if this was the case, does it make a little more sense to you now why Kessinger may not have been charged? And again, this could probably slide into the Defending Kessinger series just a little bit, but you cannot come into this with emotion. You have to look at it through the letter of the law. And being an eyewitness to a crime, most often, especially when they're trying to get the person, they're trying to shut the case down, you're going to be offered immunity. However, you're not offered full immunity. There are several different types of immunity. I go over it in another video, especially one of the Defending Kessinger videos. And even if she were given some sort of immunity, anything she says outside of those meetings with law enforcement can be used against her. So it's called use and derivative use immunity are the two that are frequently used for someone that's really close to the crime, has seen it, eyewitnessed it, but they're not yet given full immunity. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm yawning. I have coffee. And I really believe that has a lot to do with why we have not heard from her, is because she knows the public would love the details and love to know exactly what happened that morning. But if in any situation she were to sit down without her attorney present and offer up any type of explanation for that morning, she knows it could put her in some hot water. And so I leave you guys with this, but if she showed up, as I've said before, and Chris is proving to her, hey, I'm not lying, I told you Shanann was delayed at the airport, you know, I can't come over right now. Who knows what the plan was? Maybe there wasn't even a plan to murder at all. And I know a lot of people think everything was so premeditated, but I don't know. Do I think he thought about it? Probably, because depending on how fed up he was in that moment, it happens. more than you would like to, like, accept. But to actually go through it, or go through with it, and including the kids on top of that, after protecting them from the birthday party, is the part that really hangs me up with the girls. Because if he knew they were going to not be here anymore, then why in the world even remotely protect them in that moment? I mean, hell, let them have the cake. And that was not the case at all. And so anyway, if Kessinger comes over, Chris is like, hey, I'm telling you, she's not here. Kessinger sees that she's not there. You know, Chris is all about trying to get Kessinger to, you know, trust him and stay with him and all this. And so it goes into a full-on, you know, sexcapade intimacy in their bedroom. And then, you know, Shanann comes home. And the thing is, I've mentioned it in the earlier video, Chris says she barely made it to the bed. Okay, so what's not to say that she walks in and Chris has already got all the sheets off the bed, and she's looking at him like, what the hell? It's almost 2 o'clock in the morning. Why are the sheets off the bed? And he's like, oh, I washed them. Well, why the hell would you be washing the sheets? Like, it's only been you staying here. And why, if you were doing it, if Chris was doing it for Shanann, they would have been washed and dried and back on the bed. Does that make sense? So if you come in, you're already suspecting he went out to dinner with another woman. You come home, the sheets are stripped off the bed. He's already washed and dried them. He's just not put them on the bed yet. As a wife, you're going to be coming in going, what the hell? And then that would make sense for her to launch into, I knew there was someone else. And then that blow up into an argument or a problem. But at that point, was Kessinger already gone? Did she already leave out the back door? Was she there? Did she hear the argument that ensued? Did she witness something in the house? You know, what extent of an eyewitness was she? Did she participate in it? And that's where everyone cannot and will not let this go until there is legal proof and forensic proof that shows this woman truly was exonerated. Like, she's truly been cleared of everything. And I don't know how the DA or anyone in law enforcement can actually say she's been cleared when we as YouTubers can come to them and say, oh, well, what about the phone ping? Oh, what about her work? Oh, what about her searches? They didn't even know about these things. Like, half of this stuff was not even pointed out to law enforcement and the DA until after the plea deal was signed, until after Kessinger had already been cut loose. Like, they knew none of this stuff, and they didn't bother to investigate it. They didn't bother to run all the evidence that should have been ran. The fingerprints off the trash bags that didn't match Chris or Shanann. Whose were they? I mean, could it be manufacturers? Possibly. But they wear gloves and machines do most of the work. So this video could go on for an hour with not understanding that angle. And that's truly why we're here all these years later. And we still talk about this case. But wrapping things up, what are your thoughts on this? Have you ever considered this angle? Have you considered this possible theory of this is why Kessinger was never charged, was because if in fact she showed up, Chris proves Shanann's not there, whether they were intimate, had sex, whatever, Kessinger laid in the bed with them for a couple, for an hour, whatever, is that at the moment the girls woke up? Did they see Kessinger? Did they notice, you're not my mommy? Think about it. The girls, at least Bella, had to have seen something. If that's the case. Because otherwise, like, what in the world would have triggered this entire just horrible tragedy? So drop me a comment below. I would love to hear from you. Please remain respectful. And guys, I know I raised some controversial topics in some of these videos, but I want you to understand, I raise these topics and these questions because these are questions I have as well. It does not mean that I condone anything that anyone did in this case. There's certain things Shanann did that I would never condone. But there's also things that commenters and subscribers say in the comments that I would not condone either. And that's the beauty of being in a free country and being able to think freely. You can do what works for you, and I'm going to do what works for me. And Shanann did what she thought was working for her. So let's just all be respectful and kind, but let's think critically. Really dig into this, not just, not name calling. So if I see any comments that are name calling, I don't care if you've come up with the most creative name for Nicole Kessinger, please don't do that. Like, let's not degrade and berate another woman regardless of what you think of her or her actions. We have to keep in mind too, this was almost 10 years ago, and who she was back then, Lord willing, is not who she is today. All of us live and learn through our mistakes, and we have got to be able to show grace as a society. So I'm going to leave it at that, but it's so good to touch base with you guys. I'm happy this topic kind of came to the forefront, but what if those sheets were off that bed when Shanann came home? We've all assumed that he murdered her on the bed, and he took the sheets off to wash them because of Shanann. But what if he had already taken those sheets off that bed because he had already had Kessinger in that bed, and so he was washing and drying them when Shanann got home? And maybe he did fall asleep. Maybe he fell asleep and forgot to move the sheets from the washer to the dryer, and so by the time Shanann got home, they weren't done. And then that is what set him up. That is what burned him. I mean, think about it. How many times do we put clothes in the washing machine and then we forget to move them to the dryer? So that, to me, is just a thought that I have not had in all these years. And it just kind of came to me as I started driving. So thank you guys for being here for this car ride conversation. And I hope to see your comments below, and I will do my best to respond to them. Thanks, guys.